the other means of installing a binary package will work here. So once you perform this kind of binary upgrade, you have to keep in mind that you need to run the MySQL upgrade script, which is designed to check the schemas and table spaces for any potential problems and incompatibilities between the MySQL versions. So this is pretty important step that you should not forget about. For MySQL replication setup, you want to go slave by slave, upgrading them one by one in a process. Performing maintenance on the slave, you want to keep the traffic of it, obviously. Once you finish performing the maintenance, you want to keep the majority of the traffic of the slave and allow it to steadily warm up. So it depends on your particular setup how you're going to do that. Most proxies, like AG proxy, for example, gives you ability to add some warm-up periods or maybe some kind of weights and distribute the load, not necessarily in an even way. You can also use the preload buffer pool data feature, which was introduced, which is available in Oracle's MySQL 5.6 and 5.7, of course. And it was introduced in the Percona server, I believe 5.1, definitely it's in 5.5. So you can use this feature to load this data to the buffer pool in some way to minimize this, to minimize the impact. What is important is that this is not solution for every problems, because the buffer pool is only one of it's the largest, but it also is just one of the many buffers that MySQL needs to warm up. For example, table cache, so the tables needs to be open, and that's this kind of stuff. But it's very useful. In general, how you do this, before you restart MySQL, you can manually running a command for MySQL CLI, for example. You can trigger the dump of MySQL filling on the buffer pool contents, and then again after the restart you can trigger this data to be loaded back. While performing an upgrade, while warming up the node, the slave, you have to keep in mind that the rest of the environment has to handle the higher load, because obviously one of the slaves is out of rotation for the duration of the upgrade and then the warm-up phase. So when you go step by step, slave by slave, once you finish upgrading all of them, old master has to be upgraded. So you have to perform a failover and upgrade the old master. For Galera, the process is pretty similar. So you go node by node in the cluster. Again, nodes have to be restarted, so the traffic needs to be moved out the node where you are performing the maintenance. The same problem with the warm up applies here also. So you have to perform the warm up after the restart. And again, also preloading buffer pool can speed up the warm up process. And before we go to the major version upgrades, we have another pool for you. So I'm back to you, JJ.
Great, thanks, Christoph. Yeah, so we wanted to ask all of you, again, just another question. And this is to find out how often you upgrade your MySQL infrastructure. So it'd be interesting to see what your habits are there, and if you have what your processes are, whether it's on every minor version or maybe you only do it on major versions every few months or once a year. or maybe there isn't a process whereby you upgrade, and there can be various reasons for not upgrading as well. So it'd be great to get your feedback here and see what everyone in the audience does for their upgrades. So I'll just give it a few seconds, and of course I'll share the results again once everyone had a chance to participate. In the meantime, we did get a few questions already, so feel free to ask more. We'll try to answer them all towards the end of the webinar, of course. Great. So thank you for your participation here. I'm just going to close the poll now and share the results. Right. So it seems pretty evenly spread between those of you who don't really do upgrades and those who only upgrade on major versions and every few months as well. It's a little bit different to the results we had earlier today. We had the same webinar earlier today for our European and Asia Pacific friends. Any comments on this, Christoph?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, running upgrade every few months is, I would say, perfectly valid solution, because I mean, usually we don't have to stick to the latest, and yet it's more, but it's still, we're sticking to the almost latest version, and it's much more better in terms to how to handle it. Less resources are needed to keep up this kind of upgrade scenario process. On the other hand, not upgrading at all, as you said, things are not easy to answer whether you really have to upgrade or not, because as long as you have secure environment with databases cut out from the regular traffic, and as long as your workload is stable, it doesn't change, then very likely, as long as your application was tested correctly, it will keep working. So there's really no much need in getting the new features, new security patches, and this kind of stuff. As long as your workload is stable and you don't really need, you are not suffering from scaling problems or this kind of things which would force you to move to a new, better scaling MySQL version.
Great. Thanks, Christoph. So I'm just going to hide this again and hand back over to you.
Okay. Okay, so thank you, JJ. And yeah, major version upgrades. This is definitely a much more complex process. In general, logical upgrade is a recommended way to perform it. If you go to MySQL documentation and to the upgrade instructions, you will see that for 5.5 and 5.6, dump and reload was explicitly mentioned as a recommended way of performing an upgrade. In 5.7, this recommendation was removed, so it kind of makes the binary upgrade the same level of security than like a secure field for a user than the dump and reload. So it should work just fine. But still, we will be talking about dump and reload process because this is, I would say, more complex and more time-consuming process. So yeah, definitely it's time-consuming because dumping and reloading data may take some time. Yes, if we are talking about I don't know, 100 plus databases, it may start to take hours, and larger the data, longer it will take, even days sometimes. So definitely somehow the replication will have to be involved, because this is the only way to actually shut down the MySQL or stop it from the active workflow, perform some maintenance, and then let it catch up and sync with the rest of the infrastructure. So even for Galera, replication will most likely be needed. As I said, in place binary upgrade is possible to use as a major version for major version upgrade. As I said, it's kind of recommended for 5.7 only. Prior to that, it is kind of supported, but it's not recommended, and there is a reason for it. And from my personal perspective, I've seen really weird issues which happened on the databases upgraded using binary upgrade. I've seen problems with with flapping query execution plans. I've seen weird issues thrown into error log regarding the replication, and all those things vanished after dump and reload. So it may work for you just fine, but it may not. So definitely want to perform a really detailed set of tests to confirm that you are not suffering from any such problems if you really want to perform binary upgrade. But if you don't want to do that, if you want to use this recommended, quote-unquote recommended version of the upgrade process, then you will have to perform a dump and reload. So most likely you'll be doing step-by-step upgrade because that's the only way to do it. So first of all, what we want to do is build. We can either build a new slave or use one of the currently used slaves in the replication topology. As long as the rest of the replication topology, the infrastructure can handle the load when we put this one slave out of rotation. So as you can see on this simple diagram on the left side, we have a 5.5 cluster, and we are just taking one slave off the rotation, and we are performing logical dump. So once we take the slave out of rotation, we need to write down some binary log coordinates where we stop the replication. We run the logical dump using MySQL dump, MyDumper, or any other mean, whatever you want to use. It can be your own scripting or any other tool. Once it's done, we clean this host. We remove the MySQL data dir. We remove MySQL packages, install new version. So in this case, we remove 5.5 and install 5.6, and then we are loading the data again using those known coordinates. We set up as a replication, and we let it catch up. So depending on how long this whole process took, we can be like hours behind the master, or sometimes days. But one way or another, the slave will catch up. It should catch up eventually. So then, to speed up the process, we can instead of loading the data, we can use some kind of binary backup, like extra backup, or maybe EBS snapshots if you are in AWS, to upgrade, to rebuild the other nodes. So basically, you take the node out of rotation, remove the old MySQL version, install new MySQL version, rebuild the data volume using the data from the upgraded node, and that's it. Step by step, you should be able to upgrade every slave, and then you fail over and then upgrade the master. For Galera, things are slightly different. So in general, cluster can be treated as